Jesus wasn't crucified in that Bible. That Bible predates the King James version of the Bible.
I actually have a facsimile. So I have a photocopy that was done by the British Library of Codex Sinaiticus that I work with in my office. I mean, I can go on right now, Codex Sinaiticus, and I can look up the end of Matthew 27, where it has Jesus being crucified. So when we're engaging with oral history, what methodologies are you using to confirm that the orality is accurate?
All right, so on one side, we've got Billy Carson, this self-proclaimed researcher who loves to throw around wild theories and questionable sources like they're facts. And on the other hand, we've got Wes Huff, a legit Christian scholar working on a PhD, someone who knows the manuscripts and history inside out. So already it feels like a serious credibility mismatch. This isn't some casual back and forth. No, this is more like a stress test, like watching a missile launch to see if it'll soar or explode on impact. Let's see what happens when those claims hit actual scrutiny. I'm curious to see how someone who's used to loose storytelling handles the pressure of having an expert in the room.
I'm curious for you guys both, and if you want to, I guess, go first, Billy, as to how you came about like the findings where it seems that Jesus was not crucified, or that's not accurate.
Sure. And in my videos, and if you listen to the podcast, the statement is according to the Sinai Bible. Okay, according to the Sinai Bible, Jesus wasn't crucified in that Bible. That Bible predates the King James version of the Bible, and the text there actually is about 12 to 14,000 differences between the Sinai Bible and the King James version of the Bible, which came much later. And then also one of the things that were interesting is that they discovered the book of Jesus' wife, which is at the Harvard Seminary, which, according to some scholars, is a little controversial, but they claim that this is an accurate record that Jesus may have even been married, which then adds more. If that's true, it adds more to the hypothesis that maybe he wasn't crucified. Um, I just personally believe that Jesus was an amazing human being. I don't think that he was the Son of God in the sense that he's God, but that we're all gods. As he said, ye are gods, and that we're to do greater things in him. And I just personally believe that the return of the Christ is the return of the Christ consciousness. When we can all achieve a certain level of knowledge, wisdom, passion, understanding, empathy, love that he came to this planet with, and we get that in our mind and our conscience, and we can act on those incredible emotions and that understanding, that the whole world is going to transform instantaneously. And I think at the second coming is the coming of the Christ consciousness to the planet, not a human being flying back to Earth to save people. That's just my personal understanding of how I've perceived it over many, many years of going through this information and going through all this text.
But I really appreciate the fact that you seem to have investigated to a certain degree some of these facts. Do you mind if I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
When you say the Sinai Bible, what are you referring to specifically?
It's the biblical text that was written. It made it into you can actually look it up on Amazon. It's a Bible called, I have a version at home. It's called the Sinai Bible, right, from Mount Sinai. I'm assuming that's the mountain that they're referencing there. But they put together their own version of the biblical text prior to the King James version being put out.
Sure. So when you refer to the Sinai Bible, would you be referring to Codex Sinaiticus? Like the codex that comes? Okay. That's why I was trying to get some clarification, because so you can actually go and see Codex Sinaiticus is at the British Library. So you can go and see it. It's on display. And the British Library has actually digitized the entire manuscript. So I work with manuscripts in my linguistic work. I'm an expert on early Christian scribal culture, and particularly in Greek and Coptic manuscripts. I actually have a facsimile. So I have a photocopy that was done by the British Library of Codex Sinaiticus that I work with in my office. So I have it here. And The only reason I asked for clarification is because I want to make sure that what I'm addressing is actually what you mean,
Gotcha.
and not addressing something else. Because the Codex Sinaiticus in particular is just a it's a 4th century Greek manuscript.
Mhm.
It comes from approximately between 325 and 350 AD. And its text of the Gospels reads almost identical to the modern Greek text that we develop translations from. So my curiosity is just simply in kind of exploring when you say that it denies the crucifixion or that the crucifixion isn't there. I mean, I can go on right now, Codex Sinaiticus, and I can look up the end of, say, Matthew 27,
Mhm.
where it has Jesus being crucified, and that's in Codex Sinaiticus, or the John 19, or any of the other ones. So I think my
Can,
my confusion is that it doesn't read any differently. So actually, are you able to pull up a website? Would the
Yeah,
viewers or listeners or
I'm
whatever be
looking
able to
for
see
it
that?
right now to make sure I have
what
the right
what
the version that I'm looking at.
while he's pulling that up too,
On one hand, you've got Carson kind of flailing around his "trust me, I read it somewhere" approach, and on the other hand, we have Wes Huff calmly measured and just laying out the facts. Carson's claims start to wobble, because the moment someone who knows what they're talking about steps in, all those unverified tidbits and buzzwords fall apart. You see, this is what happens when hype-based storytelling runs into real disciplined scholarship. It's like a house of cards meeting a stiff breeze. But here's the thing I appreciate most. Huff isn't just here to win an argument. He's showing that faith and reason can stand together, stronger even, when they're grounded in evidence. For Christians, this is important. It's encouraging, honestly. We don't need to be afraid of scrutiny, because when the truth gets tested, it holds up.
I'm just curious. Like the Sinai Bible, where was that
I
piece
found the
discovered?
text where I was referencing. Actually, I was misquoted. I misquoted there. It's the Gospel of Barnabas.
Okay, yeah. Well, so that's good. So let's deal with that too, because I've actually worked with. There are 2 manuscripts of the Gospel of Barnabas. The Gospel of Barnabas is a really interesting document because it is a known forgery, and so that's why I think it's important to get to these sources. So, at the very start of the Gospel of Barnabas, which we only have 2 copies of, one is in Italian and one is in Spanish. We see right off the bat that the Gospel of Barnabas, not to be confused with either the Epistle of Barnabas or the Acts of Barnabas, which are 2 apocryphal documents from the 2nd century,
Mhm.
but the Gospel of Barnabas in particular, we know it's a forgery because it does things like in chapter 92, it says that Jesus spent 40 days on Mount Sinai, and then he came to the Jordan River and he walked to Jerusalem. But Mount Sinai is more than a week's journey away from Jerusalem, and neither Mount Sinai nor Jerusalem are close to the Jordan River. So never mind there not being a route from the Jordan River to like around Mount Sinai or going to Jerusalem. But there are internal problems with the Gospel of Barnabas, which indicate that it shows no actual indication of evidence of coming from or even having knowledge of 1st century Jewish understanding. It actually says Jesus is the Christ, but not the Messiah, which indicates that whoever the author is, he didn't know that those were the same words. And I think a bigger problem is that the Gospel of Barnabas actually paraphrases Dante's Inferno, which was written in 1314. So there's a lot of internal evidences that disqualify the Gospel of Barnabas, never mind the fact that we don't have any evidence of it prior to the 14th century, and none in any other language other than Middle Age Italian Italian and Spanish. But the internal content of the Gospel of Barnabas disqualifies it from being ancient. And then the fact that it's doing things like paraphrasing Dante, or it also refers to a rule of the time of Jubilee, which was changed in the Middle Ages from what it was in the biblical year of Jubilee. and it goes with the Middle Ages concept, not the ancient concept. So I think what I'm getting at is, so I'm a historian.
Yep.
And I deal with sources. So when I'm looking at sources, I want to make sure that I have a methodology by which I approach any type of source. So if there is something that denies the crucifixion, I want to make sure that I'm analyzing it and that the methodology by which I analyze it actually reveals that the content can be accurately tied to the event. So if we're talking about, say, Codex Sinaiticus, that's in the 4th century. Now that is, I would agree with you, Billy, our oldest copy of the Bible in the sense of cover to cover, Genesis to Revelation copy of the Bible.
Right.
The problem is that we have individual copies of all 4 Gospels going back hundreds of years before Codex Sinaiticus. So I have a facsimile behind me of P66. This is a late 2nd century copy of the Gospel of John. I work with this particular manuscript. I can just show the screen right here. This is an almost complete copy of the Gospel of John. And it
Is that the
has the
papyrus by
crucifixion.
any chance?
Yeah,
that
so
word that I
papyrus
seen?
is just the what it's made out of. So
material it's on.
I got that from
Yeah.
ChatGPT, by the way.
Yeah,
Sorry,
so
guys. I'm just
I
trying
can
to sound
actually-
smart for a second.
I have that papyrus at home.
Oh, that's
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I
so I'll show you this. So so the documents you actually see on my bookshelf behind me are facsimile papyri that I've made. So when I was in Egypt last summer, I went and I got made for me some papyrus sheets. And so I take these papyrus sheets, which are made from the papyrus plant. And then when I go and I look at actual manuscripts, so I was at the University of Philadelphia last summer, and I went and I saw a document called P1, which is a 3rd century fragment of the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew. And so what I did is I sat down with that original and I produced a facsimile. So I copied the text. First of all, I cut it out with an X-Acto knife in not the original 3rd century one on my papyrus. I cut out with an X-Acto knife this guy, and then I copied the text transcriptionally on the front and the back. So papyrus is just simply, it's what it's made out of.
Yeah.
And so there's categorizing systems, and the standard one is called the Gregory Alland categorizing system. And so sometimes you'll see when manuscripts are mentioned, they'll have a GA and then a number behind it. If it's made of papyrus, you simply abbreviate the word papyrus to P, and then you have the numbering system. So P66, what I showed you earlier, that's this on the categorizing system. It's the 66th manuscript that was put into the system. It's from the Gospel of John. I also have, P46 and P47 on my shelf, which includes all 4 Gospels and Acts from the 2nd and 3rd centuries. So the only hesitation I have with what you said, Billy, is that we have single copies of the Gospels that can be dated to the 2nd century that all do have the crucifixion. And so if we're relying on something like the Gospel of Barnabas, which is not just like, it's not that there's debate about it, it's that it's a known forgery. I mean, no one's referring to the Gospel of Barnabas as anything other than...
If you say it's a known forgery and expert, I'm going to go with that. Let's talk about the Old Testament a little bit and leading up into the New Testament.
Well, hold on, because...
I can't help but ask, how much of what we just heard was substance, and how much of it was just for show? This is where it gets interesting. Let's see if Carson can actually back up his claims or if he starts backpedaling.
Do you mind if I address the Gospel of Jesus' wife?
Sure, go ahead.
What was her name?
Yeah,
I'm like trying to write notes like I know what I'm doing, but I'm just curious.
So the Gospel of Jesus' wife doesn't actually mention. So oftentimes what happens is that the text of the Gospel of Jesus' wife is kind of paralleled with the Gospel of Philip, which mentions that that Jesus would kiss Mary Magdalene on the mouth. And so those are kind of used in parallel to kind of for this argument that Jesus was married. So the Gospel of Jesus' wife is in the Harvard Library. However, the reason we know it's also not legitimate is because even though the manuscript, the papyrus that it's on, was carbon dated to the 4th century, the text was actually copied from a PDF version of the Gospel of Thomas, known as Grandin's Interlinear, and there was a mistake in the Coptic text of Grandin's Interlinear that was copied into the Gospel of Jesus' wife. So we know that this is not a legitimate document, even though the papyrus is ancient, and this happens a lot with forgeries. I have a couple of friends who have actually worked on projects that have revealed forgeries within Dead Sea Scroll manuscripts and within other ancient Christian papyri. But the reason why we know the Gospel of Jesus' wife and that Karen King, who kind of vouched for it and she lost a lot of credibility, unfortunately, for her, and she's admitted that it's a fake as well, was because we can tie it directly to not copying from an ancient text, but actually copying from an online version of the Gospel of Thomas in a PDF form. And the mistake on that PDF form was copied into the text of that was borrowed in the phraseology of Jesus' wife. So I just point that out is, once again, with our sourcing, I think we need to make sure that we're going towards not just early sources, but actually credible sources. And unfortunately, neither the Gospel of Barnabas nor the Gospel of Jesus' wife are credible sources in terms of actually, and agreed upon by not just the vast majority of scholarship, but I don't know anybody in the field of papyrology, paleography, historiography, who actually refers to these documents as being legitimate.
That's fair enough. I can respect that. So let's go into the Old Testament a little bit.
Man, this is turning into a masterclass in dismantling nonsense. Watching someone like Wes, who's done the hard work, calmly peel away the layers of confusion and hype, it's satisfying, to be honest. It really is. You can almost see the claims unravel in real time. And here's the takeaway. It doesn't matter how loud you shout something or how much confidence you throw behind it. If it's hollow, it's going to collapse under the weight of real evidence. For believers, this matters, because what we're seeing is faith in conversation with disciplined, rigorous research. Faith that doesn't shy away from hard questions or tough challenges. And that's powerful. This isn't about throwing cheap punches. It's about sharpening the truth until it cuts through the noise.
Okay, so when we're engaging with oral history, what methodologies are you using to confirm that the orality is accurate?
Oh man. Well, first and foremost, some of these texts some of these cultures have written down information in caves. You've got cave paintings. The Dogon tribe actually have not only written down
Sure.
these
No, I
texts,
don't disagree with that. The
but
question
they
is one
have
of
the tools
historic.
to show the.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. The question is one of methodological analysis. So you have to have a method by which you can find either that something is falsifiable or that there are avenues by which you can show internal and external accuracy of credibility. So this is what we do with documents. This is what we do with the ancient gospels. This is what I do. I've worked on Xenophon and Plutarch, and we look at the internal evidences and the external multivalent corroboration to try to figure out, okay, yes, we have all these stories. Great. I don't deny that. But as a historian, as someone who's trying to figure out what is accurate, how do you if I use the term verisimilitude, do you know what that term means?
No, but I can tell you this.
By this point, it's clear there's a pattern. Exotic claims might sound exciting at first, like sparks flying off of a firework, but give them a minute and they fade out. The flash disappears and you're left with, well, nothing. So what's left? Can Carson actually offer anything solid here, or are we watching his whole argument burn out? I mean, let's see if this last part cements the difference between pulling ideas off random YouTube soundbites and really knowing what you're talking about. This is the last stand.
Tell me how the Dogon tribe saw Sirius B, knew the orbit of Sirius B, a trinary star system, accurately, and can show you the orbit with a special tool that they made that was given to them by these people. How do they know the shapes, the sizes, the colors, and the orbital pattern of all these planets in our solar system and other star alignments that they would use to have something called the Ziggy and their own harvesting and planting and so forth and so on. That's not enough
So
evidence,
I'm
though, that there's something
well,
in
I'm
the.
not a Yeah, I'm not aware of that particular case. And even I mean, I would grant that the ancient people are far more technological advanced than we give themselves credit for. Just because they're ancient doesn't mean they're stupid. I am well aware, as someone who has done both investigation in the past and done archaeological analysis, that is a reality. My question is simply, okay, you have these stories or you have these accounts. You're referring to them as eyewitness testimony. How are you going about verifying that as that?
Well, if the people had eyewitness testimony about Jesus, they then just wrote down their eyewitness testimony on a piece of paper or parchment paper or papyrus. So these
Right.
people,
So that's where
some of
internal
it's oral, some of
methodological
it's oral, some
analysis.
of it's actually written down. So I mean, it's the same exact thing. There's really no difference.
Well, no. So you do internal investigations to figure out when something was dated. So something like so when I use that term verisimilitude before, that's something we as historians are looking for. It's a term that simply means the appearance or likelihood of truthfulness. So when you do historical analysis, it's an inference to the best explanation. So you have proof and you have data, and you're extrapolating that data on levels of probability. So some things can be confirmed as high probabilistically true, and other things are lower in their probability that they happened. But there are different methodologies, different ways that you explore historically how that happens.
Well,
So
that
for
was
the
done.
Gospels, you look
That
at
was done with the Dogon tribe. Scientists went there to visit the tribe.
And there it is. This final section feels like the knockout punch to a house of cards. But here's what I love about this. It's not just about proving someone wrong. This is about showing that Christianity can take the heat. It can stand up to real questions, real scrutiny, because the foundation is solid. And for anyone who's watching this and feels tired of all the cheap sensationalism out there, this moment matters. It's a reminder that truth isn't afraid of tough conversations. It's not afraid of experts or facts, because real scholarship will always expose shallow, baseless claims. So here's the thing. We've got to care about this. If you're serious about faith, if you're serious about truth, then you've got to sharpen up. Don't settle for noise. Don't settle for lazy answers. Trust the evidence, trust the research, and let the truth shine, because no amount of hype or confusion will ever snuff it out. At the end of the day, truth is what stands tall. It's the noise that fades. So if you like my video, please like and subscribe, and see you in the next one.